Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. A very warm welcome to another virtual seminar organized by the Seminars and Conference Committee and Taxation Committee of the Institute of Certified Management Accountants of Sri Lanka, the National Professional Management Accounting Body in Sri Lanka, incorporated by an Act of Parliament. CMA has always played a lead role in the digital environment to update the knowledge of its members by organizing continuous professional education programs for its members. This is the second tax seminar organized after a very well attended seminar on the highlights of Inland Revenue Amendment Act number 10 of 2021. The presentation on the Finance Act number 18 of 2021 will be delivered by Mr. Attula Ranavira, Managing Partner, Ranavira Associates. This will be followed with a panel discussion moderated by Mr. Duminda Pulangamua, Partner, Ernst & Young. And the panelists are Mr. N.R. Gajendran, Senior Partner at Gashma & Company, Mr. Nayoma Gunavatana, Partner at Nithya Partners, and Ms. Priyanka Disabandara, Tax Advisor at the Ministry of Finance. I also warmly welcome CMA President Professor Lakshman R. Vattavala, Vice President Mr. Henaka Bandara, Council members, members of CMA, invitees, ladies and gentlemen. To commence the program, I have pleasure in inviting Professor Lakshman R. Vattavala, Founder President, CMA Sri Lanka, to deliver the welcome address. Professor Lakshman R. Vattavala has led the Sri Lankan accounting body, starting with the Chartered Accountants, the South Asian Federation of Accountants, founder of the Accounting Technicians and founder of CMA Sri Lanka, and SAFA board member and chairman of the SAFA International Relations Committee, a proud receiver of the National Honors Sri Lanka Sihamani in 2019.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Gajendra. Let me welcome all of you. I think Mr. Gajendra has also already mentioned your names, but let me once again welcome our speakers, panelists, and the moderator, and also our Vice President, the Council members, members of CMA, other invitees, and ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of CMA Sri Lanka, let me welcome you to this continuing professional development program that we are conducting. Today, of course, it's on a very, very important topic on the Finance Act number 18 of 2021. We have a very, very eminent speaker, moderator, and panelists who will really give you the full contents of what is there in this act. That's the most important thing. We have the professional accountants. We have also the legal side, and of course from the government and the department side. So I must also welcome Ms. Priyanka Disabandara, the tax consultant at the Ministry of Tax Advisor to the Ministry of Finance. We are very happy that she is here with us today. Just to tell you a little about CMA, I think a lot of you have heard, I think it was also mentioned earlier, but there are some important events that we are organizing. First of all is the sort of continuing CPD programs that we have been conducting for all our members. And of course, next week, where we are having our conference on the 25th, 26th, on the 26th, 27th, and 28th of September on reviving the Sri Lankan economy post-COVID and beyond. So that, I think, is a very, very important conference that we are organizing. I do hope all of you are present here would also enroll for that and listen to the very, very eminent speakers who will be present at that conference. Then in addition to that, we've also now conducting the CMA Excellence in Integrated Reporting Awards 2021. We've had received a number of applications, and if there are any of you all who in your companies who wish to enter that, you all are all welcome. And as you know, integrated reporting is, I think, is the newest form of reporting that is there, and also where we speak on value creation. In fact, if you look at CMA Sri Lanka, we've also put it, if it's there on our backdrop, the value creation. That's the most important thing, especially the private sector is now not only looking at the financial considerations, but many non-financial considerations. And I do hope that the government too will also look at this, because today they are spending money, but also what is the value that they are creating to society and the public. So that's a very, very important area that we need to look at. And these sort of seminars that we are doing will enrich the knowledge of not only the professionals, but those who are in the corporate sector, those who are in the business sector, and everyone. If you really look at the CMA, we are really an organization that is very, very close to the business sector. And all our professional accountants are working there. And we are very happy that you all are attending this. But at the same time, I just want to tell you that CMA is a national body incorporated by an act of parliament. So we have a national interest. And today, even in the present crisis of the exchange crisis, because that we are a national body, you are able to pay in Sri Lankan rupees and continue your education. In addition to that, we have now gone, as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic, to the digital means. That is why we've been able to conduct all these webinars at your convenience. We are all at your service. Our education, all our education is done online, where we are giving it to the students. Not only that, but we also conduct the examinations. That is the most important thing, because if you are unable to conduct the exams, the students will not be able to continue their education. And also we ensure that our students who enroll with us will finish their education at 21 years. Latest 22, and also they are working. They will get their practical training, they will get in employment, so that you start your employment, you get a professional qualification at a very young age. That is very, very important. And today we are having an aging population. So maybe if we do not start work early, then we will not be able to make a contribution to the economy of this country. So that's our main area where we are helping the society, the public, the students. Some of them may be not aware of this, but if they want to know, maybe all those who are present here should think of that. Then in addition to that, professional management accountants are really, as I said, business partners. They are working in business, and you will be able to see that today what is happening, a lot of them are talking of costing, pricing. So we have now, we will be very soon launching the cost and accounting management standards framework, which will be available to all the companies in order that you will know how to cost a product, how to make it, how your productivity could be improved, how your costing could be improved to increase your exports. Now, these are all important matters where we make a contribution to the economy of this country. So these are some of the things that I thought that, because if you really do not tell these matters, you really do not know as to what is happening. But the digital means is something which has come and it has been forced on us. If things are not forced on us, we never do it. But today we've changed tremendously because that this has been forced on us, and I'm happy that it has really changed the whole, maybe the way that we do our work, the way we do our business, the way we do our education. It has entirely changed our whole society, and I think we can make a quantum leap as a result of this. So we have to continue this and ensure that this goes there. So today, with those introductory remarks, I have great pleasure in welcoming all our speaker and the panelists on this important area, because this was a bill which was certified on the 15th September 2021, and today it is an act. So it is our experts, the financial experts, the legal experts, the government experts, the tax department experts, all are now joining hands to tell the public as to how this is going to be implemented, what are the benefits of it, and why you should come into the make use of this one. So I think it's a big maybe gift that has been given to certain sections of the people who can really make use of it. So without I'm there are two parts in it. One, of course, is the voluntary disclosure, and the other one, of course, is the write-off by the Commissioner General of India. So there are two parts to it. So it will help the business sector, I think, in a very big way. But we also need to see that if these things are coming in, and it will also help to jumpstart the economy and help the government also to overcome some of the problems that they are having. So with those introductory remarks, let me hand over to our compeer, Mr. Gajendra, so that he can introduce the speaker and we could get started with our sessions. I think he is having some problems. So let me introduce Mr. Atula Ranavira. I think he is a senior member of our CMA profession and also a senior chartered accountant. We know that he conducted the last seminar, and I think it was very well received on the changes that have taken place. Now today it's the Finance Act number 18 of 2021. And I think there is no other better person that we can get to give the details of this, because education is a must. Not education or the continuing professional development is a must, because you should really know the true facts, because I think we have heard so many stories that are coming. But today, as a professional body and as professionals, we are really stating what is there in that and what are the good things, what are maybe have to be discussed in order to benefit you. So with those introductory remarks, may I invite Mr. Atula Ranavira to make the presentation on the new Finance Act number 18 of 2021 with the CMA CPD program. Atula, over to you.
Thank you very much, Professor, for your introduction. And today, in this session, now first I'll explain the content of the law in an analytical way. Then thereafter, we will go for a panel discussion to answer various queries thereon. In order to proceed on with today's session, I would like to open a PowerPoint presentation which I have prepared. I will open the PowerPoint presentation now. This is the Finance Act number 18 of 2021. Now they have, at the time of when it was in the billing stage, there were some objections against that. As a result, now subject to the Supreme Court determination, they included those things and passed the act and certified on 15th of September this month. From 15th of September, it is a legal document. Now, first of all, we'll see what we are, we'll see introduction of amnesty laws. Now, why the government need this amnesty law? Why some governments introduce amnesty laws? Now, if we'll see, now, first of all, what is that? Amnesty is some type of a tax relief or tax written off the whatever the money what we have without making tax payments. It may be black money or any money what where it was liable to tax, but no taxes have been paid. Now, if it is the situation under an amnesty law, we can declare those things seeking tax immunities. Then, if we'll see the history of taxation in amnesty laws in Sri Lanka, there were almost 14 amnesties in the history. Now, out of these amnesties, the amnesty law, what they have introduced in 2004, which was a fairly successful one, in that they covered so many other legislations. They covered so many other legislations. Right. Then, but this time when we see the current legislation, it mainly covers only two tax laws, that is the income tax law and the VAT law. There are certain other laws also, some penalties and all taxes, that's all. Right. Then, we'll see what the government expect by introducing a tax amnesty. Now, when we take this particular law, the government, because we are in a bad financial situation, as a country, Sri Lanka is in a bad financial situation, especially with relate to the foreign currency. Therefore, with that situation, the government may have expected, maybe expecting some undeclared foreign currencies bringing into Sri Lanka through this amnesty law. That may be one major reason for this particular amnesty. Then in addition to that, it may be to write off all taxes and clear whatever the arrears matters with relate to the tax administrator. Now, if you'll see the tax administrator in Sri Lanka, the Department of Inland Revenue, in certain cases, we get some assessment, certain collection notices and all for very old years. That means there are so many arrears tax matters due to various reasons, which includes even low compliance of the taxpayers. That is also one reason, and maybe with certain inefficiencies of a few employees of the department. That also may be a reason. Right. Then that may be another reason to simplify that. Then the other thing, a lot of government are expecting to widen the tax net by introducing tax amnesty. By introducing tax amnesty, new people will come into the tax net, then therefore the government can collect more tax in a future period. Now, but at the same time, when they are introducing this type of tax amnesties, there are certain other things to be considered. Factors influencing to the success of the amnesty. Now we'll see what are the factors influencing to the success of an amnesty. One is coverage of the declarant coverage and the declarant's confidence. Coverage of the amnesty. Now, as I mentioned, if you see 2004 amnesty law, it covered a lot of area, a lot of taxes than this. But this time, it is covering mainly the income tax and certain VAT. That is, coverage is very much important. Now, some people are afraid to declare because by declaring, they might get caught for various other laws, bribery acts, and various other laws, maybe even for Foreign Exchange Act, that is the finance, for Foreign Exchange Act, and various other acts. Then the confidence of the declarants. Confidence of the declarant. Now, if the declarants are having a good confidence on this amnesty law, then without any fear, they might declare their hidden sources, hidden income, or maybe hidden wealth. But if they don't have that type of a trust, they'll be reluctant to declare it. Then the other thing is how often the government is introducing tax amnesties. Now, if we'll take Sri Lanka, as I mentioned, there were almost 14 amnesties. That is not a good sign, because what will happen, the people who are not in the tax net, they might think, why I'm declaring this time, why don't I wait for next time? They might think to declare in the next time. Therefore, with that situation, sometimes there will be some people may be reluctant to declare this time. Then, next thing we have to see the user friendliness of these amnesties. This time, of course, the law up to a certain level, it is user friendly. Even the declaration format, even the declaration formats are included into the law. That is, then it is very easy for a person to decide what type of a declaration he has to do and how to do that declaration even by that himself. Then only problem when we take these amnesties, it shows unfairness to the genuine taxpayers. Now there are certain genuine taxpayers who may be paying their taxes at the rate of 18%, 24, 28 or 40%, earlier 28. But at the same time, the person who didn't pay tax, now they'll be paying only 1% and declaring that money. There's a unfair situation in that. Therefore, there will be a lot of public objections in that. Now we'll move forward to see what are the items what we are going to discuss in the law. Now, when we take the law, as Professor mentioned, there are two parts, part 1 and part 2. Part 1 covers the voluntary declaration. Then the people should declare that. If the person declare it, he can enjoy the immunities under the part 2 is the Commissioner General's duty. There we need not to declare anything. The Commissioner General should study the database what they have, the information what they have. Based on that, the Commissioner General should write off certain things. Then there are schedules. There are 4 schedules, Schedule 1, Schedule 2, Schedule 3, Schedule 4, to explain what are the laws covering under the amnesty law. Then it gives 2 formats of declaration. Then in addition to that, there's a requirement under Section 5, there's a requirement of the Commissioner General to specify certain things. That is, he specified that he fulfilled that requirement on 17th of September. Now that document is there in the IRD website. Then in addition to that, he has given some type of explanatory notes also. That's a detailed note like this PowerPoint presentation. Now I'll move to the first part. First of all, I'll explain the first part. Now in the first part of the law, slide number 3, in the slide number 3, it says it is applicable, it says this law is applicable to any person who has not disclosed, any person who has not disclosed. What? Any amount of taxable supply, income or asset. Taxable supply, income or asset. Then taxable supply. It says taxable supply. Now see, taxable supply, then taxable income or taxable wealth. I can see there's a small technical error in this. The taxable wealth, taxable assets. Now in Sri Lanka, no wealth tax. Then when there's no wealth tax in Sri Lanka, principally there can't be taxable asset. That is the taxable assets are represented by taxable supply or taxable income. It is represented by taxable income. But technically, when it is mentioned as taxable asset, that means there's a issue in that. Right, which was required to be disclosed under any law specified in Schedule 1. In Schedule 1, it covers, I have given an extract of Schedule 1 at the end. It covers only the income taxes and VAT. It covers only the income taxes and VAT. Right. Now, when we take this first part basically it covers the income taxes and VAT, income tax and VAT. Right. Now, It says, further says, for any year of assessment ending on or prior to 31st March 2020, any year of assessment ending prior to 31st March 2020, the immunity is there only up to 31st March, only on the taxes up to 31st March 2020. Then here it says the person to whom this act applies. Now, the person whom to this act applies is a person who has not disclosed any taxable supply, taxable income, or asset. Right. Saying that, I would like to move forward. The persons to whom it is not applicable, that is also specially mentioned in this law. It says this law is not applicable to certain persons. Now we'll see to whom this act is not applicable as per the law. To whom this act is not applicable to the certain person. Right. A, it says, any person in relation to whom the investigations or legal proceedings are pending. The investigations and legal proceedings are pending. Then, if there's an investigation or a legal proceeding is pending, for those people can't enjoy these immunities. These legal proceedings under what? It says under Money Laundering Act, Terrorist Finance Act, Bribery Act, then Narcotic and Drugs Act. Under these acts, if there are any pending investigations or legal proceedings are there, then you can't enjoy the immunity under this law. Then next, any person who has been convicted of an offense under above 4 acts. Now, I mentioned 4 acts, mainly Money Laundering Act, then the Terrorism Act, then the Bribery and Narcotic Acts. If you are having any offense under any of these acts, then you can't enjoy this immunity. Then the next category, any amount of undisclosed taxable supply, income, or asset held by any person in respect of which an assessment is raised. If there's an assessment has been made, if an assessment has been made, then that particular person can't enjoy this immunity. Under what laws? It says under Schedule 1 and Schedule 4. That means under Schedule 1, as I mentioned, it covers income tax and VAT. Under Schedule 4, it covers Betting and Gaming Act, Finance Act, Stamp Duty Act, and Stamp Duty Special Provisions Act. Then now there's a small issue in this. Now, if the assessment is made and already finalized, what will be the situation? That is not covered with this law. It is not explained. Then suppose the assessment is already finalized and agreed for a tax payment, but the tax liability not yet settled. It is due, right? If it is the situation, what will be the situation? Now we'll move to the next slide, slide number 4, slide number 5. Right, slide number 5, it explains the person, what he has to do. Now, if this particular person who is entitled to immunity, what he should do? Person shall invest or deposit. There, what it says is, person shall invest or deposit. Invest or deposit. More or less same, anyway. An amount equivalent to the undisclosed taxable supply, income or asset. That means this particular person, either he should invest or deposit an amount equivalent to the taxable supply or taxable income or taxable asset on or before a certain date. That there's a time period, that is from the day of effectiveness of this law, that is the day is 15th of September, in any day from 15th of September 2021 to 31st March 2022, you have 6 months, 6.5 months time period for you to make a declaration. Okay. Then, before making a declaration, you have to fulfill something. What do you have to do? A, immediately purchase or invest such amounts in. Immediately, either you have to purchase or invest. There are 4 categories, the 4 areas where you can invest. Number 1, shares of any company, including a private company, any company, then treasury bills and treasury bonds, then any quoted debt securities. In the case of debt securities, it is only quoted debt securities. Next, any movable or immovable property, any movable or immovable property in Sri Lanka. Now, if the first option, if you wish to, you can go and invest in shares, treasury bill, treasury bonds, or any quoted debt securities, or movable or immovable property. Now, there may be a situation where you are not in a position to invest immediately. Because now your asset, now you have some black money, we'll say the money where you have not paid taxes, but already you have invested that in a immovable property. Then the second option, if you are unable to do this before 31st March 2022, what you can do is to deposit that money in a bank account. But even for that, you have to have money. That is the problem. Then I have mentioned there are 2 options: investment in assets before 31st March 2022 or deposit before 31st March 2022. Then after doing this task, next step is making a declaration. That means for you to make a declaration, you have to fulfill of this investment or depositing. Once you made the investment or deposit, next step, you make the declaration. Declaration formats are given in the law itself. It is very easy. Now, once you, before declaring that, you have another commitment. That is, you have to pay 1% tax on that. It says 1% of such amount income on the cost or on the cost of such asset newly invested or deposited. Right. Now, during this 6.5 months time period, you have to newly invest. Now, once you invest on that value, you have to pay 1% stamp duty, 1% stamp duty, 1% tax on that. It says such amount, income or cost of such. Then the second bullet, it says 1% of the market value of such property on the day of the declaration. That means now suppose I had some money in my hand. Today I purchased a property. But I'm making my declaration only on next year, 31st March, the last day I'm declaring. Then from today to that date, during this 6-month time period, there may be an increase in value of that property. If it is the situation, if I'm declaring that, I have to pay the 1% on the market value. But why should we wait till that date? Best thing is to no sooner we make the investment, best thing is to make the declaration. Then the other thing, once we pay this tax, no credit, no refund on that. Once you paid, it is paid, that's all. At the same time, this particular tax cost, 1% tax cost, is not an allowable expenditure for your income tax purposes. Right. Yeah, next slide. Now we are moving to the next slide. In the next slide, I have explained the law. Actually, this is a reproduction of the law. Now, what it says, voluntary declaration further state. Now, any person to whom this act part applicable and fulfill the above requirement. What are the requirements? Investment or depositing, then pay in 1%, then make a declaration. On or before 31st March 2022. The Commissioner General, once he made the declaration, the Commissioner General, now for this, the Commissioner General should give a guideline, which he has already done. He was supposed to issue the guideline within 7 days. But what it says is this guideline should cover the payment and filing. The guideline should cover only the manner and payment of manner of payment and the manner of filing. That's all. Not any verification type or anything like that. Okay. Then the Commissioner General shall verify. It says once he submit the declaration, Commissioner General is supposed to verify it. What he can verify? As per the law, he is not supposed to verify the accuracy of the figures. That is the special thing in this law. He shall verify whether the declaration is in accordance with this act. That is the only thing what he can verify. Whether the declaration is in accordance with this law and not that whether these the documents what he had submitted and all these things, whether those are accurate. That is not his duty. Right. That is to make it more simplified. Then if satisfied, that means if the Commissioner General is satisfied with the whether this declaration is in accordance with this law, then within 30 days of declaration should acknowledge it. If he is not accepting it within 30 days, if we want to reject it due to some reason, he has to reject it in writing. In writing, he can reject it. If he is rejecting, he has to give the reasons for rejection. Then the declarant can file a new fresh declaration. Declarant can submit a fresh declaration. Then, if Commissioner General refrain from acknowledging that or refusing that, if the Commissioner General didn't accept it or didn't refuse it, then after 30 days, within 30 days, he is supposed to do that. If he will not done that within 30 days, it is presumed that he has accepted it. That's a good sign, right? Then, if the Commissioner General failed to inform the declaration within 30 days, yeah, as we can take it as accepted. Then, any declarant who provides false information, if a declarant give any false declaration, then if the declarant give any false declaration, false or incorrect information in the declaration shall not be entitled to immunity granted. If we will give any false information, that particular person is not entitled to the immunity. But the issue is, here the issue is, who is there to check this, where the information, whether the information are correct or not? Because as per the authority given to the Commissioner General is supposed to verify only whether that declaration is in accordance with the Act. But Act requires to declare the correct information. Therefore, indirectly, he'll be able to check certain correctness of these documents. Now we'll move forward. Yeah. Imposing of tax on voluntary declaration, we'll see further things. on that. Now, any person who make a correct declaration, which is accepted or deemed to be accepted by the Commissioner General, is getting the full immunity under this. Now we'll see what are the immunities. I have, for easy understanding, I have put certain numbers for that. I have put certain numbers. Immunity, full immunity from the liability to pay tax. Liability to pay tax. That means no need of making that tax. No need of settling the tax. Then penalty. No need of making that penalty, settling the penalty. Then the interest. No need of settling the interest. Or from, not only from these things, that means that you can ignore the tax payment, penalty payment, and the interest payment. Not only those three, those are payments. Then investigations or prosecutions under this law, under those subject laws. Now, there won't be any investigations or prosecutions under those laws. Now, what is the period cover with that? This interest, penalty, and tax payment, and the investigations and prosecutions coverage. For which period? Any period under the Inland Revenue Act, if it is under the Inland Revenue Act, that is income tax, up to 31st March 2020. In the case of VAT, for any period ending on or prior to 31st March 2020, right? Up to 31st March 2020, you are safeguarded. You are safeguarded. Then the Commissioner General shall ensure the granting of this immunity. Then Commissioner General or any officer of the Department of Inland Revenue should maintain absolute secrecy of this information. Now, where any person or fails to come, now what I was telling, the Commissioner General or any officer of the department should maintain the absolute security of these things. There are two things what he should secure. One is the declarant. He shouldn't declare, he shouldn't leak this declarant to any other person. That is one thing. The other thing is the content in the declaration. The content in the declaration, that is with the various information. The department can't misuse these things. Then we'll see the next point. It says, where any person to whom this act applies. Now suppose I have 100 rupees which I have not declared for tax purposes. I have declared all my money, we'll say 5 million a year, I declared. But by mistake or due to some reason, I have understated 100 rupees. Now I realize that for 2018-19 year, I have declared 100 rupees lesser than the actual. Then I'll be a victim under this law. Then even it is 100 rupees, to get the immunity, I have to make a declaration. Now what it says, this is a threatening part, where any person to whom this act applies fail to comply with the provisions of this act, he shall be liable to be dealt with in terms of the provisions of the respective laws specified in Schedule 1 or 4. That means if we are to get safeguarded, even it is 1 rupee, we have to make a declaration. Actually, this type of a clause shouldn't be there in a law like this. I don't know what made them to include it. That of course, I can't understand. Then 2.8 point, the provisions discussed under Part 1 of the Act shall apply to any person to whom the provisions related, notwithstanding anything done or any amnesty enjoyed under the 2004 Act. Now we'll say, I made a declaration under 2004 Act also. Still, I can make a declaration, I can use the immunities under the current law. No problem of that. Then I have put these red color ones, all the red color ones are my remarks. By reading section 8 of the Act, it indicates that this law is forcing or threatening the person to whom this part applies to comply with this Act. Right. I'll move forward. Now we have discussed the matters in part 1 of the law. Now we'll move to part 2 of the law. Now the part 2 of the law is the duty of the Commissioner General. We need not to make any declaration under part 2. Commissioner General himself should give us the immunity. He is responsible for that. But only thing what I can't understand whether it is practical. Because the Commissioner General or tax officers are having enough and more work with that situation to dig into each and every tax file of individuals and see these things and take action may be a bit difficult task. Anyway, this is the law. We'll see the part 2 coverage of part 2. These provisions shall apply to any person who is liable to pay any tax arrears or any penalty imposed under the provisions of law specified in Schedule 1, 3, and 4. 1, 3, and 4. Right. Now, in this case, in the case of income tax, for any year of assessment commencing prior to 1st April 2020, it covers the period up to 1st April 2020. In the case of VAT, it covers the period up to 31st December 2020. In the case of VAT, there's a small difference there, only up to 31st December 2020. Right? Then, under the section 10, it says like that. But when we see these things, the immunities, the Commissioner General shall write off the following tax arrears in respect of the period ending on or prior to 1st April 2020 in relation to the taxpayer. That is section 11 explain that. Section 11 explain that. Now it says, under any law in part A of Schedule 3 here too. Under any law in part A. Now part A, what are the items covered? Only in the part A, Schedule 3 here. Now that part covers various old taxes. I have given this in slide number 13 and 14. We'll see that later. It covers various old taxes. Right. Then under the specific provisions of the value added tax specified in part B, Schedule 3. Now those are the items which are covered with this. Those are the items which are covered with. Under this VAT, it says the Schedule 3. Then further it says where in respect of any period ending on or prior to 31st December 2020 in relation to taxpayer. In relation to taxpayer. Next slide talk what type of people are covering with this. It says the Commissioner General shall write off any income tax arrears by any individual. By any individual. There it says, Commissioner General shall write off any income tax arrears payable as at 31st December 2020. That is the cutoff date, 31st December 2020, by any individual. This individual is also explained. What type of individual is explained? That means up to the year of assessment ending 1920, it is covered. Right. It says, year of assessable income of that particular individual should not be more than 3 million for the year ending 31st March 2020. That is 1920 year of assessment, the assessable income should not be more than 3 million. It has to be an individual, and the assessable income of 1920 should not be more than 3 million. Second point, assessable income before reducing any loss should not be more than 3 million, including unrelieved losses. That means this particular assessable income, including the losses what you are deducting, before deducting the losses, it should not be more than 3 million. Then the assessable income should include, for this 3 million threshold, the assessable income should include the final withholding tax paid income as well as exempted income. Exempted income as final withholding tax paid income. Then the next condition, the business or partnership gross turnover, that individuals, business or partnership. Here the business, it may be a sole proprietorship or a partnership business. Gross turnover for the year of assessment ended 31st March 2020, that is 1920, turnover should not be more than 500 million. 500 million. Now, if you are fulfilling all these conditions, then your certain tax amounts, arrears tax amounts, to be written off by the Commissioner General from conducting. Suppose the assessable income includes some business income of betting and gaming or business of liquor, then you are not qualified. Then you are not qualified. We'll move to next slide. That means this coverage is very limited. By seeing this, we can understand this under part 2, the coverage is very limited, but that's a good sign. At least the volume of old outstanding matters of these files could be removed by the Inland Revenue Department. They can finish off those things because they have to write off these. Then next, the Commissioner General shall write off any penalty or interest. What he can write off? He can write off the penalty or interest. The penalty or interest. Then calculated in terms of the provisions of those acts in respect of which the payment due date was 31st December 2020. As at 31st December 2020, that penalty or interest should be outstanding or for a prior date. If the taxpayer settles, now for you to get the immunity, if there's an outstanding tax amount, first you have to pay the tax amount. If you pay the tax amount, then the Commissioner General can write off the penalty and interest. Right. The payment of tax before 31st March 2020 is a must. Following disputed tax arrears, there may be certain disputed tax arrears on an assessment made in relation to the taxpayer under the provisions of any respective law specified in Schedule 1 or Schedule 3 hereto shall not be written off. If it is a disputed tax amount, then those things shouldn't write off. Disputed shouldn't write off. If there is any dispute in relation to any tax arrears where the hearing was happening prior to 15th September 2021, or the decision was pending by 15th September 2021 before the Tax Appeal Commission or by any courts. That means if there's a pending case at the Tax Appeal Commission or the courts where the hearing was happening prior to 15th September 2021. then those are not covered with this. Provisions, any duly claimed pending tax refunds. Now, earlier it's mentioned that the Commissioner General should write off something. When he is writing off something, at the same time, for certain years of assessment of certain period, there may be overpayments by us. That means a refund due from the department. Now, if there's a refund due from the department, at the same time, there's some amount to be written off, then Commissioner General should set off that refund against the amount to be written off, arrears amount to be reduced by that tax, that overpayment refund. But as per this law, the taxpayer can request the Commissioner General not to set off. He can say, you process the overpayment separately, you give me the overpayment separately, refund separately. I will make the payment before 31st March 2022. Then, as per the law, Commissioner General should accept that and act accordingly. Only thing, the Commissioner General should be in a position to make sure that this particular person is settling the arrears taxes. On taxpayers' request, the Commissioner General may grant approval for arrears tax payments. PANs. Now, suppose this particular taxpayer may not be in a position to settle the entire amount at once. Now, in a situation like that, he can agree with the Commissioner General to enjoy a plan of settlement. Payment plan could be arranged. Now we'll move to the next slide. Now, what I have done is briefing the law. Now, briefing the law. From this slide onward, what I have given is a copy of the Act, various schedules, formats, and the guidelines, things like that. Now, if we'll see these schedules, now schedule number 1, as I mentioned, schedule number 1, it covers only the income tax and VAT. Only the income tax and VAT. Income tax, they have specified certain acts. Act number 28 of 2079, 38 of 2000, 10 of 2006, 24 of 2017. Those are the income tax laws. They have specified 4 income tax laws. Then the Value Added Tax Act number 14 of 2002. Those are the acts what they have covered under Schedule 1. Those are the things mainly covering under the Part 1 of the law. Then Schedule number 2, if we'll see the Schedule number 2 covers 4 laws. The Money Laundering Act, then Terrorist Financing Act, then the Bribery Act, then the Narcotic and Drugs Act. Those 4 acts are covered under the Schedule number 2. But Schedule number 2 are not much covered in the law, only in 1 or 2 places they have covered. Then if we'll see the Schedule number 4, Schedule number 4 covers 4 different tax laws. Betting and Gaming Levy, then Finance Act, then Stamp Duty Act, then the Stamp Duty Special Provisions Act. Those 4 acts are covered under the Schedule number 4. Basically, they have, in most of the places, they have covered the Schedule number 1 items and Schedule number 4 items. That is the income taxes, VAT, then Betting and Gaming Levy, Finance Act, Stamp Duty Act, and Stamp Duty Special Provisions Act. Now we'll move to the next slide, Schedule number 3. Now, Schedule number 3, as I mentioned, see, all these things are very old taxes. Some time back, we had wealth tax and gift tax. wealth tax and gift tax imposed under the Inland Revenue Act number 28 of 79. Then Turnover Tax Act number 69 of 1981. Then earlier we had surcharge on wealth tax, surcharge on income tax. Then National Security Levy Act, which then Save the Nation Contribution Act, then GST Act, then surcharge on income tax act, then Act number 2000, income tax Act number 6 of 2001, then Debit Tax Act, Social Responsibility Act, then Economic Service Charge Act, Nation Building Tax Act, Economic Service Charge Act. Then part B of that is says optional value added tax imposed under the section 25H, the Value Added Tax Act, and VAT advance payment deducted under the section 26A. Right. Now this VAT, if you have already collected the VAT from the other party, then you are not getting the immunity for that part. As for this law, the VAT, what you have already collected from the other party, you are not getting the immunity for that. That's a special thing in this. Now we'll move to next slide. We'll just run through it, run through the next couple of slides just to see. Now this slide shows the declaration format given for individuals. Declaration format given for the individuals. Now, if you'll see this declaration format, there are some technical errors in this. Now, I have whatever the technical errors or some items to be specified, I have put in red color as remarks. Right? I have written there now, how come taxable asset when there is no wealth tax? Because in this law, everywhere it says taxable asset. Now, even in this slide, now item 2 says taxable supply, income, or asset. Now, earlier we had wealth tax, but now we don't have wealth tax. Therefore, there's a small technical issue on that. Then, how a supply represent as at a date? Now they are talking now with relate to the VAT. For VAT only they have used the word taxable supply. Taxable supply. Now when this mention as taxable supply, supply is not as at a date. An asset may be as at a date. Supply or income is not as at a date. It should cover a period. But the law says asset. Law says asset. Now here in this item number 2, if you read the item number 2 description, which is 100% matching with the law, I do hereby declare following taxable supply, income, or asset, which were held by me, because this is individuals one, held by me as at 31st March 2020. That means this is now asset. When we mention asset, it has to be an asset, right? In Sri Lanka or any other country. In Sri Lanka or any other country. Therefore, I feel these are technical errors of wording in the law. Then item number 3, what I have mentioned, next page, there's a word what they have used, money. Now we'll move to next page. Item number 3 says money declared as above. Money declared as above. Actually, this should be better if they have used the word the amount or value declared as above, not the money. It is value. It should be either value or amount. Then the next question what I have, item number 5 says pending cases. Now, if you'll see this item number 5 of this, item number 5A, item number 5A, I have no investigations or pending cases. Pending cases. Why they have used a separate, a different word than the law? Law says legal proceedings the word, they have used the word legal proceedings. Now here in the declaration, instead of using the legal proceedings word, they have misused a word called pending cases. They could have easily used the same wording as given in the law. Now, those small technical weaknesses are there, but I don't think it will badly affect the meaning of the whole law. Now we'll move to next slide and see the same thing what they have designed for an entity. This is the format what they have given in the act for an entity. Now in this, here, as for section 5, there's a requirement for the Commissioner General to make a declaration, a guideline, right? Now he has to issue a guideline as per the section 5.2. It says the Commissioner General may specify a guideline. Even it says may, he has specified that in the department website on 17th of September. Now in this, it explains, as I mentioned earlier, it explains, we'll move to next slide, it explains the payment of tax, because there are two things what he has to do, the payment of tax, the way how you have to do how to calculate it and how to make the payment, he has explained in this. Number one, he has explained the payment of tax. Then in the next slide, he is explaining the methodology of filing of declaration, because he is supposed to specify two items, the payment and filing. He has to touch those two. Therefore, he has given those two explanations, guidelines in this particular document. Now, if we'll move forward, now in addition to these things, voluntarily, he has given an educational note. It is very important. This is an explanatory note. It is very important for the success of a legislation like this, because everybody look into this with some fear. I might think, now by declaring, what will happen to me? Whether the Inland Revenue Department, the tax official will misuse this information for something else, or whether I might get caught for some other laws, the litigations under some other laws, some violations. Therefore, it is always better to give this type of educational materials even by the tax administrator. Now this next couple of slides, I have just put it, that is not so important. We'll move forward to the last slide. We'll move forward to the last slide. Yeah. Now in that, actually that's all what I have to mention. The explanation of the tax law, the new tax law. As we mentioned, if we are summarizing, there are two parts. One is the voluntary declaration. Once we make a voluntary declaration, we have to do certain things. Either we have to invest that money in assets, some assets, or we have to deposit in a bank before 31st March 2022 and pay 1% tax thereon and make a declaration to the Commissioner General. That is part one. In part two, the Commissioner Generals, he should attend to that to write off certain old taxes. Now, by doing that, he'll be able to get rid of various old arrears tax matters. That's a good sign. With that, now we can move on. We can, I can wind up my explanatory part. Then we will continue with panel discussion. If you are having any questions at the panel discussion time, you all can put those questions forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir, for your very well explained presentation. Next on agenda is the panel discussion moderated by Mr. Duminda Plangamua, Head of Tax for Partner Ernst & Young, and Deputy Vice Chairperson of the Ceylon Chamber of Commerce. He has served as the Chairman of the Faculty of Taxation of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of Sri Lanka for last 4 years. Joining us as panelists are Mr. N.R. Gajendran, Senior Partner at Gachma and Company, Mr. Nayamal Gunawardena, Partner at Nithya Partners, and Ms. Priyanka Disabandara, Tax Advisor at the Ministry of Finance. We invite you to send your questions and clarifications on the question and answer. Over to you, Mr. Duminda Plangamua.
Thank you, Mr. Gajendran. Thank you, Professor. And thank you very much, Atula, for that excellent and very comprehensive presentation. I don't know whether there are any questions to ask because you have explained most of it for the panel. Anyway, what I will do is I will first do a round of reactions from the panelists who have been waiting for a long time. And then I'll pose some questions that I have formulated myself. So I'll take the questions from the flow as a last item. So first question, what I want to ask, Atula has dealt with the law in detail. I'll come to that later. But more on a policy matter, I want to ask first question from Mr. N.R. Gajendran. Gaj, you can hear me, right? Gajen, you can hear me?
Yeah, I can. Yeah.
Yes. Yes. So, Gajen, my first question is to you to ask you. I mean, you have been in this field for a long time, and we have had amnesties in the past. Then we had revocations. Those were revoked later. Newmark problem, I talk on that later on. But from a policy perspective, do you think this amnesty law is drafted and is adequate to bring the money the government intends to bring from foreign currency as well as local currency to kickstart the economy for some money that is outside or here? Do you think that impetus that the government expects from this law will come in? I'm sure it's a difficult question, I'm putting a difficult position, but your perspective, considering the past amnesties, how successful they were, and what do you think of this amnesty in your view? Will it bring the desired results and objectives?
Thank you, Duminda. I wouldn't know whether the government has pronounced what was their real purpose or intention of the amnesty. But if you see world over, when amnesty has been introduced, there are two reasons why they introduce. One is they want some instant revenue.
So, Professor, can I go to the
Yeah, we'll go to the next one.
Sorry, Gajen, in the interest of the audience, I'll go to the next person. I'll come back to you once this is organized. Sorry about it, Gajen. My next question is to Mr. Nayamal Gunawardena, who's also a chartered accountant and attorney at law. Nayamal, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Yeah, I can hear you. Yeah.
Yes. Nayamal, you also been in the practice for a long time. And have seen these laws getting passed, amnesties, and then especially the revocation that took last time. A lot of people ask me as well, what happens if this is also revoked? Someone is having 2 units on air. So, Nayamal, is it possible to give some brief as to what happened in the last Supreme Court judgment that came subsequent to the amnesty getting passed, and whether these laws also can be subsequently reversed, so there's some fear that people have that they can repeat again. So if you can just shed some light on the previous Supreme Court judgment and your views on this.
Yeah, with regard to the previous Supreme Court judgment, yes. So the fact is that as much as an amnesty is granted, there is nothing which stops the amnesty being revoked. And so much so that in revoking, sometimes they indicate that the granting itself was colorable, right? So therefore, the fact that the granting of the amnesty itself would have violated the equality provisions or something like that in the tax law. Sorry, in terms of the constitutional law itself. So I think Parliament has the entitlement to pass laws. It has the power to revoke laws and take action accordingly. So I don't think there's any constraint on that. But fact of the matter is that obviously there was a change of government at that time, and all those things also, I think, had an impact on that.
So Nirmal, is it possible to tell us what the Supreme Court judgment last time was?
Yes, so Supreme Court judgment is based on whether there is a violation of Article 12, that's the equality provision. Or in other words, they are saying they are tax compliant people on one side, as opposed to people who are now who have evaded tax and now who are claiming coming under the amnesty. So therefore, the Supreme Court has to decide as to whether there is a violation of the equality provision. Now, in this particular case, the Supreme Court, there are certain exceptional situations where the equality provision can be surpassed. And in this case, they have relied on Article 14(7) of the Constitution, which says that the equality provision can be surpassed in a situation where it is for the purpose of meeting the just requirements of the general welfare of a democratic society. Right now, you can judge for yourself, right? It's for meeting the just requirements of the general welfare of a democratic society. So the state, in the course of the argument, has taken up that this is the reason why the amnesty is required. They are saying it will ease the fiscal deficit as a temporary measure at this critical time. They are saying that it will encourage tax evaders to disclose their wealth and raise funds that are required for government coffers to spur economic activity. They are saying losses have been suffered by certain businesses as a result of the economic impact of COVID-19. And these words are also interesting. And this also sets out a scheme to usher in tax evaders into the National Tax Administration. Usher in, right? So usher means to welcome, right, into the tax department, right? People who are normally not coming to the tax department. And it also says that this is also interesting, as the bill covers both existing tax filers as well as not tax filers, the compliance rate is expected to increase up to 60%. Now, I don't know where these have come from. Definitely, I think it would have come from the revenue, or I think ideally from the Ministry of Finance. So I think that also could be explained as being the reasons which the state gave in the course of the Supreme Court case for the purpose of the amnesty.
Thanks, Nirmal. Gajen, I can go back to you if you're ready to complete the answer that you couldn't earlier.
Yes, the first part was how much revenue you can raise. I will be impressed if we can raise 10 billion, 1 trillion rupees. 1% is 10 billion. So if you are targeting 100 billion, then we have to have a 10 trillion base. This thing, which will be 2/3 of a national economy, which is 15 trillion. So that's the first. Second one is whether you can bring all these guys who have been evading the tax into the net so that the future tax base can be enhanced. That is the expectation of the courts also. The compliance rate is going to increase to over 60%. That has been submitted, as Nirmal mentioned. The question here is, we are the country, I think, which has given the highest number of amnesties for tax purposes and exchange control purposes. Even in the court proceedings, the Deputy Solicitor General has mentioned 21 countries or 22 countries which has given amnesties, and only one country it has given, I think, Indonesia. I'm not sure. It has given about as much as 5 amnesties in the countries that have been listed, which has been also stated. So we have given 14 amnesties. The last one was in 2003-04, which was again a messed up situation where you gave amnesty, and then there was a sort of a change of government. They reversed the amnesty. So the question of confidence and whether these things cannot be remained, because I've heard some opposition members speaking that they will definitely look into the sources of income if they come into power, because they are very particularly important about the sources of income, where is this money coming from. So on those two questions, I don't know whether surely there must be a base or some thinking behind the introduction of the amnesty, because this was introduced in the budget also. I wouldn't know whether this is a targeted program also for someone to bring the monies if they know. So both questions, both issues, I don't think it is looking very healthy at the moment. The revenue
Thanks,
and the
Rajesh.
future compliance, because we have had so many amnesties, and whether our base has increased is the question. This also can be an indictment on the revenue administration, because we are having so many amnesties because revenue is not up to the task of raising revenue.
Thank you, Ajay, for that answer. Ms. Disha Bandara, are you online? Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Yes.
Disha Bandara, my question to you, I know I would want to put you in a spot because you are a government servant. Just to ask you, you have been also in the department for a long time now, we have met each other for a long period of time. You also, I think, the department at the time the first amnesty was granted and all the other amnesties. So do you think from a department's experience, once an amnesties are granted, do you have you found that the number of people who are complying thereafter is increasing? Those very people who declared how the increasing has the tax base really gone up? The objective is to increase the tax base and bring them to tax net. What is the experience in the department in terms of your previous experience? Has it been successful?
Actually, Mr. Hulangamo, during the past period, I was not in the country. Therefore, actually, I don't know what was happened at that time. But as I heard, that was reversed by the government, because I think that is because of the government change. So I think in this case, now there is no signal like that. So I think there won't be this kind of reverse of this amnesty. So actually, I don't like to use that word amnesty. This is not. This is not an amnesty. This is actually a voluntary disclosure. So there may be several people that they couldn't declare their income because of the several reasons. Now we are going to give them an opportunity to declare their income. The main objective of this is to enhance the compliance, to expand the tax net, and to encourage them for the investment and savings. So those are the main objectives of this act.
Yes.
And yes, and as all of you know, the government introduced a simple, transparent, and efficient tax system to all stakeholders. So this new system is designed to ease the tax administration, increase the tax compliance, and promote savings and investments. Actually, this finance bill is part of that system.
Yes. So do you think, is the government confident that more people will come into the tax net because of this law, and the declarations will result in a higher tax base? Is what your expectation is?
Actually, this is now they are also tax based, because they have to pay tax at the rate of 1%, though that is a nominal rate. They also have to make the payment. So we can't categorize them as tax evaders. So now they have an opportunity to take. They can take this opportunity and they can come to the tax net. I think that is the most important thing, and that is the most important thing to them, and that is the government objective.
Right. Thank you, Mr. Bandara. I'll the second round of questions, I'll come to you on very specific items. I just want to take a question that has come from the audience. I mean, there are Professor 61 or 80 odd questions, so I can't take all of them. So I'll pick and choose the questions that come. Mr. Ranavir, I want to ask a question from you. I don't know that you're going to answer this question. Someone is asking when he's making a declaration under this law, Niyamala, anyone can answer this question. And we have to go to the bank to make the deposit, whether it's a foreign currency or a local currency deposit, which are hitherto not declared. Then am I subject to know your customer policies and such declarations that are made to the bank? Will I be exempt from that, or I have to make sure that those requirements I have to meet from the banking point of view?
Yeah, I think that's a very good question. Those are the suspicions people are having. Now, with this type of suspicions, people might not, certain people might refrain from declaring these things because they are not sure about the law. Now, as for certain other, if you'll take the 2004 Act, it was well covered than this. But this time, the coverage is very much limited. As a result, now, the other thing, now the law says that you have to invest or deposit. Invest in any movable or immovable asset. Now if you go and deposit this money into a bank, under the banking law, they will ask, actually the money laundering, because of money laundering thing, the bank will ask various questions on that. Then you are supposed to give this information. If you have failed to give this information, bank might not accept that deposit. Therefore, there's a practical difficulty. But
yes,
if a person wants, now even without money, somebody can make a declaration for a future income. Now we'll say, today I don't have any money with me. I don't have any undeclared money, but I have some sign of getting some commission income in next year, huge amount in next year. Today I can make a declaration under the amnesty law. What I can do, I can say, I bought a gemstone. I declare that I bought a gemstone. As per the law, Commissioner General is not directly, he is not required to verify that transaction. Right? Now, as a result, he might ask only some purchase document, that's all. Now you can buy these things from another person or in an auction. If you buy through the auction, you are paying 2.5% tax at the auction, then it is 100% legal, the document. Even just because there aren't any documentation in the gem business, generally there won't be documentation. That's a general pattern of that business. Can the Commissioner General refuse it? But with this law, I don't think the Commissioner General is in a position to refuse it. Then you just declare a gem. Next year, when you get this commission income, you might say, I disposed my gemstone and utilize, and this is that money. Now, therefore, when it is too open also, there might create unnecessary manipulations. Now, there are issues like that. But as you mentioned, as this question asks, there may be barriers of making deposits with banks. The bankers are asking various questions.
Yeah, thank you, Atula, for that answer. I know it's a difficult one to answer. Some of these things may not be possible to give exact answer, right? May I now turn to Gajen, just to get your views. There's a question that has come from the audience, which is a very interesting question. That the government has given amnesty, or I use the word amnesty, Mrs. Abandara, because it's commonly used word, to exempt certain people from having to pay their taxes if they're undeclared income. Then, is it fair for the Department of Inland Revenue to assess for additional income tax those taxpayers who have declared and paid the income tax?
Certainly, they shouldn't do that. They shouldn't do that, because if you see in the 2004, 2003, 2004 amnesty, at that time they were calling it exoneration. Now they are calling it voluntary disclosure. These are new invented terminologies. At that stage, future assessments were all stopped. Of course, that the law was reversed. Here also, if they should have put off cut-off date, and they should have stopped all assessments up to a particular point of time. Otherwise, absolutely a discriminated treatment, whether this was revisited by the Supreme Court or otherwise, it may not be unconstitutional, particularly because of Article 15.7, where which Niyamal also mentioned, which is a very broad term, welfare of the society. It is how can you, when you give on one hand amnesty and voluntary disclosure, then voluntarily the department also shouldn't make any assessments. If it is a voluntary disclosure on one side, what is good for the goose is good for the gander, right? And here the guys who have compliant and paying the taxes. There is another point when you ask this question, this voluntary disclosure only of the profits, income or taxable income, assets or taxable supply up to 31st of March 2020. What happens to the next 1.5 years? The guys who have been evading, they will be continue to evade. So after 1st of March 20, you are sitting, when you go and make a declaration, you are a sitting duck, because it doesn't mean that you evaded income or undisclosed, if you don't want to use the word evasion, undisclosed income, assets or taxable supply. It's only up to 31st March 2020. After that, what happens? So there can be vulnerability, and the people who have disclosed, who are seeking this also, there can be problem. This should have gone up to the point of the legislation.
Yeah, I know, guys. So that's a burning question that a lot of people are asking, for which I also have not been able to give a correct answer. Ms. Zabandar, do you want to reply that the question, or reply Gajen? On one hand, you are giving amnesty or sort of an amnesty to people who cannot declare. On the other hand, there are these corporate clients and whoever, individual clients who have honestly declared their taxes and paid tax. Is it fair to assess them for additional tax, even if when they have not made a declaration because they pay the taxes properly? What is the government's view on that?
Actually, we have given this opportunity, special opportunity to declare the undeclared income. So in this case, this is the turning point. So we have to give some concession to them, some concession to them, because of their undeclared amount, they are still struggling from their payment of the taxes. That is why we have given this opportunity. So for the people who has not disclosed their voluntarily, then that amount has to be assessed by the Inland Revenue Department, because that is the duty of the Department of Inland Revenue. And actually, I want to, yes, and the another one, I wanted to clarify one issue raised by Mr.
Ranavira.
Mr. Ranavira, yes, that is, as he mentioned, the Commissioner General has to obtain documents to prove the ownership, date of acquisition, and the cost of market value of the asset. Therefore, if any person who has to declare their amounts, they have to submit these documents to the Department of Inland Revenue. Then the Commissioner General can obtain these documents. And the next issue he raised is with regard to the GEM business. So in the case of GEM business, that person has to get a certificate from the Gem and Jewelry Authority, confirming their own value and everything. So in this case, Commissioner General has the power to get these documents to check, to verify the correctness of their declaration.
Yes. So, Ms. Zabandar, on that matter, I have a further question to ask you from a point raised by Mr. Ranavira. Interesting point with regard to the amount you declare. He mentioned under Section 6.
Yeah.
There's a question coming from the audience as well, that if you fail to disclose the full amount and declare only part of it,
yeah,
say even 100 rupees or whatever, then you will not qualify for the declaration for any amount declared at all. Is that your interpretation as well?
No, actually he can, since this is a voluntary declaration, he can declare any amount he wish. So we give an immunity only for that amount, that part. So he may have more than that amount, but we will give the immunity on that part, which he is declared.
Okay. Atul, are you clear on that matter? You mentioned that some person in the audience is asking that question. Is it the full amount you get amnesty for, or is it the more declared amount? Are you clear on that?
No, I think that is clear. Whatever the amount what you are declaring, you will be getting the immunity.
Amnesty, yes.
Yes.
But my issue is, as per the law, whether the Commissioner General is empowered to verify all these things. There's a gray area in the law. If you see the law, there's a gray area in that. That is the only issue what I have.
No, in section 5 subsection 1, it has clearly mentioned that the proof documents should be submitted by the declarant. Those are to verify the ownership, date of acquisition, and the cost of market value of the assets. So those documents can be obtained by the Commissioner General to verify the income declaration.
Duminda, I have a question.
Please,
on
go
the
ahead.
remarks made by Priyanka. Say you make the declaration, Commissioner General rejects. You have made the declaration after paying the tax 1%. Commissioner General rejects. Then you have another chance to correct it. You are unable to correct it because you can't get this documentation or whatever it is. So you say if your declaration is rejected after paying the 1%, first question is whether they will refund the 1%. Second question is, because there is no refund provision provided in the law. Even if there is a mistaken overpayment, there is no refund provision in the law. No tax law you can have, revenue collecting law you mustn't have without a refund clause. That is not there. Then after that, he is a sitting duck. He can be taken to task. He declares and he gets rejected. And he has paid 1%. The first question is whether he will be refunded the 1%. The second question is, even if you don't refund it, and now that you are declared and there is no immunity for you, you can be under subject to, where is the confidence in the tax system for someone to come and enclose this, because the declaration process and the verification process seems to be strengthened. And if you see from the bill to the law, it has been very much strengthened. So that is one question. And there is another question. I think let us finish with this, because on our remarks only I am asking this question.
Disavanda, you want to ask that question?
Yes, actually, Commissioner General, if Commissioner General fails, then the declarant can submit a new fresh declaration remaining that defects. Actually, defects means in this case, if he is not entitled, there may be some declarants, they are not entitled to declare under this act. So if that kind of declarant declares their amount and paid, we can't accept that kind of declaration, because we have specifically mentioned that the persons who are not entitled to declare under this act.
My question is not that. My question is, we leave aside the people who are out of this, who are denied of declaration because of the 4 laws. Here, the person declares, he has to show documentation and all those things. The commissioner reason for good and sufficient reason, he rejects the application. The guy has paid the tax. Right?
Yes.
He has paid the tax and he rejects it. If the rejection stands, what happens to the tax? First question. And second question, whether that person will be subject to review. Naturally, because the Inland Revenue knows that there is no immunity.
Actually, the Commissioner General can reject only if that declaration is not in accordance with the provisions of this act. So he has to declare that amount. Before that, he has to invest that amount in somewhere, as in the way which we have specified in that. And after that, he has to make the payment. Then he can declare to the Commissioner General. If he has not do that kind of requirements, if he's not fulfilled that requirements, then only the Commissioner General can reject his declaration.
Yeah.
Then
So I
that
think, yeah,
person can, yes.
sure. No, I think I'll come back. I think the question is, can he get the refund in the event
No,
it is
he
rejected?
can't. No, he can't. No,
He
he
can't get
can't.
refund.
He can't get the refund because
And also,
yes.
if that is also correct answer, maybe you can't get the refund because there is no refund clause. Even if a person pays tax erroneously by excess, also there is a refund problem here in this one. Say one is the refund, other one is if the Commissioner General decides to reject and he's sitting duck.
Yes. Correct. He can be assessed.
Commissioner General can't reject all the declarations. He can reject the declarations only that are not in accordance with the Act.
Yes.
Yeah,
So
correct.
afterwards,
That is given.
Yes.
Under the Act, he is rejecting because that
Yes.
deeds are not be there. He can't verify the amounts.
Yes, arbitrary, he can't do that.
Right.
Yes.
So let me thank you, Mr. Zamana. Just let me change the line of question. I want to Neomal, who has been with us for some time. And Neomal, I mean, it's not a real legal or tax question I'm asking, since you're also advising incoming investors in Sri Lanka in your profession. What is your view about the perception of Sri Lanka when from point of FDIs? When laws of this nature are passed, do they think, okay, this is a country that indemnifies criminals? Put it that way.
Yeah, so I think the main thing is, obviously, when you are talking about investors, you're talking about certainty. And when you're talking about certainty, obviously they require certainty, and they are really not.
Sorry, not only certainty, rule of law as well. Yes.
Yeah, rule of law and certainty, and with regard to that is what they are looking for. They are really not looking for amnesties or that sort of arrangement. But actually, the more important thing is, right, it's not only just saying that we have certain things in place in the country, you also need to show it. And I think one of the excellent examples of people getting confidence in a tax system is that Vodafone case in India, where basically the Indian Supreme Court held in favor of Vodafone, a foreign telecom company, to the extent of something like $12 billion in a case. Now, what greater illustration can you give of the fact of how fairly our tax system works by having an illustration like that, right? And eventually the government of India went and reversed that, and again, I think now again they have reversed that as well. But those are the like illustrations which clearly show that our tax system works well, the entire appeal process works well, and everything in this whole process works well. That's the confidence, I think, which foreign investors need to look for from actual examples of what happens on the ground. It's doing business and just ticking off some boxes is not going to get us there.
Yeah, thank you, Neomal. Going back to Mr. Disabandara, there's a question from the audience is with regard to the writing off of penalties on taxpayers. The question is, say, for example, I've just articulating the question to you, it's been coming in this form, but I'm articulating it to you, is that if a person has a penalty or something outstanding for income tax, and he has tax in arrears for VAT or PA by some other tax, in order to write off the outstanding penalty or the interest on income tax, will the department insist, no, he has to go and settle all his taxes, including VAT, which are outstanding because they are in court or whatever, or in the appeal commission or at appeal hearing stage. Will they say, okay, no, you have to clear all your outstanding taxes in order to get a waiver of penalty of one tax? So that normally happens in the department, but in this case, will it happen, or is it just one particular tax in right?
Are you asking about the income tax and VAT? Because other abolition and all other taxes can be written off.
I'm talking of penalties and interest to be written off. So when the commissioner writes off, will he write off one particular, will he ask the taxpayer to pay all taxes in arrears, or will he say, okay, I'll write off all the penalties and interest in one particular tax? So income tax, there is no taxes outstanding, there's penalty and interest.
Okay.
But there's a VAT outstanding.
Yeah.
But it's Commissioner General writes off the penalties and interest under section 13. So will he insist, okay, no, you said all taxes and come in order to get one tax penalty written off? I don't know if you understood my question.
Yes,
That's the basic idea as I put it across. Yeah.
Actually, as specified in section 13, after making the payment, all penalties and interest can be write off. So in this case, if there is any tax outstanding, that part has to be paid by the taxpayers. Then the total interest can be write off.
So all taxes here to settle or one tax? All taxes.
No, we are going to apply this among type of taxes.
Type of taxes, right?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, that's the answer to the person who asked that question. The other question is, I think I put more questions to you because you are the policymaker and we have to clarify these matters. So the other question is with regard to the writing off of penalties and taxes in arrears and interest. Is there a request or declaration we made, or Commissioner on his own will write it off?
No, Commissioner General shall write off. That is the Act says Commissioner General shall write off. If there is no any other consequences, Commissioner General can write off. But if there is any refund matters, so before writing off, that refund has to be set off against that outstanding taxes. At that time, Commissioner General has to inform that taxpayer. So if taxpayers have more taxpayers can obtain the total outstanding list from the Commissioner General, so he can get a better idea about that. After that, he can plan what he is going to do. So Commissioner General can write off without asking from that person. But only the thing is, if they has refund matters, then the Commissioner General has to get a consent from that taxpayer to set off that refund against that outstanding taxes.
Thank you. So one final question to you, Mr. Zabandar, is in Sri Lanka, nothing is confidential. So I know the department has very confidential, nothing has leaked to the department, as I know. But the question is coming to what is the trust we can have? This information will not appear on WhatsApp or in social media the next day, or it might not appear in a paper saying that so and so declared this income. What are the safeguards? And whilst the law says secrecy has to be maintained, what are the safeguards that you all have built in terms of technology, in terms of access to information, in terms of security of information? Whether you have built in safeguards adequate so someone can't take a photograph of and post it on social media or put it across on something. Is there adequate safeguards built in by the department?
No, very few people in the Secretariat branch will involve in this matter. So the declarants has to send their declarations directly to the Commissioner General of Revenue in registered post. So no one can open those letters. And after they receive the declaration forms, those documents will be in the custody under Commissioner General.
Right. So I think that safeguard is very important for people to have confidence in the system.
Yes. Yes,
Professor, Professor, are you in the call? I can't see you. You were there earlier.
Yeah. I'm there.
Right.
We have quite a number of questions on Q&A.
Yeah,
I don't know if you have gone through it.
So Professor can't go through all the questions. 8 o'clock now.
Yeah.
What I will actually, some of the questions actually Atula has answered. So I didn't go to ask those questions again. In Atula's presentation, he's covered most of the answers. So Atula can share those probably with the people who have asked those questions. So maybe we'll get that. But I think we have covered it as much as possible in terms of the questions that we want to ask. But I can't allow you to go without asking a question from you. You also being a member of the profession and being former chairman of the BOI and all that. What is your perspective? Your final question is to you. What is your perspective in terms of law, in terms of our how foreign ministers look at Sri Lanka and say, okay, these are countries that exempt tax defaulters. will it be attractive in terms of foreign investment? Will people invest? What is your overview, being a past chairman of the BOI, you know the market very well?
Yeah, actually, I think Nirmal has already answered your question, because all these investors who are coming here are really looking at stability. No, they want the stability, and of course, as he mentioned, that rule of law should apply, and the ease of business should be there. So I think that is the main thing that they are looking, because some of these matters are really internal matters which may not concern the foreign investors as such. But foreign investors are coming, they are coming to invest. They will maybe do their own business, make the money. Most of them will get tax incentives, and they will have the safeguards that are there. So they will really worry about their investments, because now these are really not looking at FDI or any of these people who have got special approval. These are people who have done business and maybe they have not declared. So that's what the department is looking. So I don't think that we should mix it with the foreign direct investment. That's a different thing. But of course, foreign direct investment is really the stability, whatever you can go and say, it has to be stability of the exchange rate, the stability of the policies. Now, these are the most important things that we can do. So if those things are there, I don't think this particular bill will really affect the foreign direct investors.
Okay. So thank you, Professor. With that, I want to bring the moderation to a close. So there were over 100 questions. So I took the more policy, more the top level questions, that the broader questions I took. So maybe you can send these questions to Atul or someone who can answer the more details. So over to you, Professor.
Yeah, what we will do is now this Q&A, whatever questions we will also send to Mr. Atul and maybe to the other panelists also. And if there are, if they can send us the answers, then maybe we can send it to those who have sent it. Or maybe because we already have all the contacts of all of them, we can even put it in a nice table and then give the answers to all the questions and make it available not only for those who ask the questions, but to all of them. So I think that will really help everyone. So I think we've now come to the final stages. So what I will do is let me also thank everyone before our vote of thanks comes, because I know that when we called you, you all readily agreed, because I think that's the very reason that we were able to have this at a very short notice, so I must really deeply appreciate the consent that have been given by you all and conducted this seminar in a very, very excellent manner. And the main purpose, as we said, is to give the information what is there, because people are talking so many things, but I think today we have been able to explain to them what is there in this act and what are the maybe advantages, disadvantages, and the problems that one could have. So I do hope that everyone would have been able to get that. And I must thank everyone, actually our speaker, Mr. Atul Ranavira, then our Mr. Duminda Hulangamua, Mr. Nirmal Punodna, Mr. Gajendran, and of course, very especially Mrs. Disa Bandara. I think she had the strength to come and defend the government and answer any questions, so she did it very, very well. So I must thank you, Mrs. Disa Bandara, for that excellent manner in which you really explained everything and cleared most of the doubts. So may I now invite our Vice President, Mr. Hennayaka Bandaru, who is also the Vice President of the South Asian Federation of Accountants, to deliver the vote of thanks.
Thank you, Professor Vatwala. Our valued speaker and panelist, ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of CMA, I'm glad to propose this vote of thanks. After a very successful seminar and the discussion conducted by the experts in taxation, first, I would like to thank Mr. Atul Ranavira for your insightful presentation and sharing your knowledge and experience to educate the participants on a very important piece of legislation. Let me also thank all experts in taxation, our moderator, Mr. Duminda Hulangamua, and panelists, Mr. Nirmal Punawardena, Mr. N.R. Gajendran, and Ms. Priyanka Disa Bandara, for your valuable contribution and sharing the expertise. I'm sure that the guidance provided and technical matters highlighted by you all will assist all our participants to enhance their knowledge and skills. Let me also thank our President, Professor Lakshmana Vatwala, and Mr. P. Gajendran our council member for organizing this seminar and the CPD program to improve the knowledge of our members and others. Finally, I would like to thank all our council members, members of the institute, and others for your participation, and the CMA team for the support extended to conduct this event. Thank you. Take care. Stay safe. Good night to all of you.
Thank you, Mr. Hennaik. I think I must also thank our staff members, really, Mrs. Shanti. I think she is the one who's really handling this whole thing, done extremely well. So we must thank her, because today we had over 400 participants, I think. Exactly that amount, 405 participants. So it was really a record number that we had. And as I said, taxation is maybe a very, very good topic that everyone is interested in. And especially here, I think they really want to find out whether they can maybe get some advantage from the act that has been given, the Finance Act number 18 of 20. So let me thank everyone, especially Mr. Hennaik Bandara, who gave the vote of thanks, our council members and everyone. And of course, our speakers and panelists, as I mentioned earlier, they've done a very excellent job and informed everyone as to what is there, how they can also help in this. And also that we said that we will take the final measure of trying to collect all these questions to get your assistance to answer them and then send it to the participants. So let me also thank all our participants that you may be, I'm sure, advising some of your maybe people who are very, very interested to know about this. And of course, finally, that maybe that the government would be able to meet their targets, and maybe once a time period is over, they will be able to publish and say what is the benefit that they have got from this Finance Act number 18 of 2021. So thank you very much and good night to everyone. And as I said earlier, you all are all welcome for our conference, which is starting on the next Monday, Tuesday and Wednesday. And if you can register, because one of the things is that we are really, because of this COVID-19 pandemic, due to the digitalization, all these things are given free of charge, so I'm sure this is something that would be beneficial to you, and all of you should make use of it. So thank you very much and good night and all the best. Please take care and be safe. Thank you and bye.
Thank you, Professor.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank
Good
you.
night.
Thank you all.
Bye. Thank you, Atula. Thank you very much. So.